And a check, 1, 2, 3. Hello, hello, hello. That sound
Thank you.
better to
Yep.
you?
Yep.
Okay, cheers.
And I know nothing about sound, so that's a
Nice, that's great for a radio show.
So we're sitting here at Bernie LaBarge's house. I don't really know Bernie, except that I've actually corresponded with you for a number of years.
Yes, we have.
I know that you're a musician. I know you do a lot of studio work. I know you've played in a lot of bands. And
Then you do know me.
yeah, it's a pretty impressive resume.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to start at the very beginning.
Okay.
Tell me how you first got into playing the guitar.
Be the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I'm no different than a million other guys. That was it for me. And I saw George in the background throwing in these little licks, and I hearing the girls screaming, and I said, I'd like to do that.
At that moment, like you just
At that very moment, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up.
from that moment to you getting the guitar and learning to play, and tell me about that process.
Well, I grew up in a semi-musical family. Nobody was doing it for a living or anything, but we had a piano in the house. Both of my sisters played. My mom was a singer when she was younger. My dad wasn't in the field, but had great taste in music, and so I heard a lot of old stuff, great old tunes like show tunes and jazz and all sorts of stuff. So I loved music. It was always around the house, and we sang 3-part harmonies to Everly Brothers tunes or that kind of stuff. I have an older sister who is born in, she's 8 years older than I am, and then another one who's 5 years older than I am. Then I've got one who is 7 years younger than I am. But the two oldest sisters, my oldest sister, Marilyn, was a Motown freak. And when Motown first came out, she got every one of the singles, and we lived down in the basement of our parents' house and with our little Seabreeze portable player, and she would play those songs a million times in a row, over and over and over. We would write the lyrics on the chalkboard and everything else. And I just sort of, by osmosis, just sitting there as a little kid, I listened to all those tunes and loved them. And then when the Beatles came around, my middle sister, Gail, was the Beatles freak. So at that point, it was perfect because she would buy the records and I would get to learn how to play the guitar to them. So that's basically how that connected. I just somehow talked my parents into taking me for lessons, and I took lessons for 6 months. And then one day, the guitar teacher pulled out the Mel Bay book that I was learning from, and Santa Lucia was the next one on the list. And meanwhile, I had been running around town trying to find out what the sound was on Satisfaction by the Stones. What was that guitar sound? And one of my buddies is going, well, there's a guy down the street there. He says, it's called a distortionator. That's what is on that song. So I'm running around in the music store asking all these teachers, they're wearing suits and ties and whatever, do you know what a distortionator is? And meanwhile, they open up the book and they want me to play Santa Lucia. And at that point, I went, I think I got to take this away myself and learn what I want to learn rather than...
How did you go about learning these things without the lessons? Just playing the records?
Oh, I play by ear. Well, then that would be because my sister's playing the piano, and I'd go down, like they'd be struggling with their piano lessons for the day, and I would just be sitting there, and then they would go upstairs, and I would go to the piano, and I would play it better than they did, and then they would come down and beat me up. So that was a daily routine. So that's how I learned. I have a really good ear, and that's what's got me through life.
Well, I'm curious to find out, when you watched the Beatles on TV and said, that's what I want to do,
yes,
to starting to play in a band, at that point when you started playing with this band, did you know what being a full-time musician meant and what that...
I was thinking about last night when I was thinking about you coming over to talk to me today, and I knew that would come up, and I'm trying to think of how that worked. Like, I just was going to do it. There was no, I didn't really think about it. I just knew that there were bands out there, and I was going to be in some of them, and I was just going to play.
And the economics? Like
The
whether
economics.
one could make a living doing this or
Well,
not?
that involved living at home for a long time. I was still going to school. I was in high school.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then when I turned 16, I moved out of the house and had a band which was an offshoot of the Royal Bank, and we called it STEM. I put it together, so it was myself and Johnny Johnson who had discovered me. He became the lead singer, like the Robert Plant guy. I became the Jimmy Page guy, and we got a great drummer, and I guess we had a bass. Yes, we had a bass player too. So 4-piece band, a la Led Zeppelin, and then we just turned up to 10 and went. But I was practicing down my basement constantly. I practiced all the time. I listened to records and lifted licks. And the most important part of my growing up musically before I became professional, because I still haven't answered your question, was there was a music store that opened in Burlington called Music Village. And my friend and I were walking down the street, saw this guy loading records into a store one night, and just walked in, started talking to him, and he was a lot older than me. I'm just trying to think of the year that would be, because like things like Hendrix had just come out, so it has to be 67. So I was 14. So I hung around that store and played hooky all the time, and that's where I basically learned my licks, was hearing these new records, having the opportunity to either sit there and try to learn them, or they would lend me the record. I'd go downstairs and learn how to play. So that's how I got
But I presume, like anybody, to be good at anything, you just have to spend a lot of time.
That is right.
And if you're passionate about your guitar playing, then spending 7 hours and not going to school didn't matter, because that's all you did. Right?
That's what I planned on doing, and I was thinking last night of sitting in school and just being a jerk when I was, 15 years old. And I was a really good student at one point, and then I just, decided I wanted to play the guitar. And then one day, the teacher said, "Bernie, you stay after class." And I liked her, and she liked me. She was a great teacher. And I sat down, but I was just a punk at that point. And she goes, "Why don't you just quit school?" She was trying to frighten me or whatever. And I just looked her right in the eye, and I just went, "Because I'm not 16. Like, I just went, that day is coming, and then I'm going to leave. And I blew her mind by saying that, because she was expecting it to go the other way and straighten me out or whatever. But I knew I wanted to do this, so it was not an option.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then can you recall what doing this meant? Like, did it mean being a rock star? Did it mean making a living playing music? Do you have any idea?
I don't know, and I still have this feeling to this day. Like, it's not anything to do with being on stage. I love playing in a group. I just love that clicking with guys and playing a song and having it sound like that song, or stretching it out and getting to solo and having guys behind me that are sort of knowing where I'm going or taking me somewhere else, or that kind of thing. So it was like like I grew up with 3 sisters and myself. So here all of a sudden I've got a family of 4 guys, 5 guys, 3 guys, whatever it is. And we're like it's like we're in the army or something to me. Like I was thinking how weird it was that my parents were completely appalled by me being in a band back then, because of all the rumors of, bad crap that we would be doing or whatever. And, meanwhile, like if I had not been in a band and I was hanging down at the park in Burlington, I would have been way, way worse shape than I am now. So so that anyway turned out to be some sort of a little bubble I was in, So I was safer than they would have assumed, but it took me 40 years to kind of figure that out. So I just loved that camaraderie. I love the camaraderie, and I had a couple of things that kept me going. One was I had to have fun, because there's very little money in it, unless you manage to do something that pays money. But it's not for the money that you start it. I wanted to have fun, and I wanted to accomplish something at the end of the night. Like, we did a gig, and we played these songs, and people danced and clapped and had a good time, and we laughed all the way to the gig and back, and got dressed up and tuned up and played. It's just I can't describe the feeling, but I still get it now.
Wow. Can you tell me, was there ever a point where you didn't get that? Like, was there ever a point where you just thought, you know what, this isn't what I thought it would be? Like this.
Well, as I get older, it's not that the thrill of playing diminishes, but the connection between the audience and myself, whether it's in my mind or it's an actual fact, hits me, because there's an age gap now that I'm not part of that. I loved being part of this scene. I was like the same age as the crowd for so long. And now if I wanted to do that, I would be probably playing in places that I don't really want to frequent at this point in my life. And I'm not knocking anybody over the age of 50, but I liked it when I was young and playing. Like, that was great. So if there was anything that doesn't give me that feeling, it would be that, lugging gear for the millionth time up a set of stairs and starting a song with excellent players, and there's 2 rooms in the place because they're having a convention, and the second you start playing, they all walk into the other room, and you're playing to an empty hall, and 2 weeks before you were playing at Massey Hall with the same guys or making a record or doing jingles or whatever. So it's that disconnect thing that bothers me and takes the fun out of it for me, and I have to have fun. My second thing that kept me going and motivated me was that I always strived to be the worst guy in the band. That was my motto, right? And I think other people have said that since, but I made that up myself. So, and I searched for things like that. So that got me out of Burlington, and I went down to the States for a little while, came back and lived in Hamilton, and there were some really good players there. But then I started being the big kid on the block in Hamilton but I saw no result for that, so I had to move to Toronto.
Right.
And that was all my decisions. It's just that's where the scene was. Dominic Turano lived in Toronto, so that was good enough for me. So I tried to go there and be in that world, and that worked out magnificently for me, I'm happy to say.
What would have been the turning point once you moved here?
When I moved to Toronto, the turning point was living in Hamilton and deciding that I was going to put a band together of really good guys, and I was going to go out and scout guys. I didn't care where they were from, but I was going to go out and check out a whole bunch of bands all over the place and just make up my dream band, and then get on the telephone and try to coax them out of or into quitting the band they were in and joining a band with a guy they probably had never met or heard of before. But I was going to buy a truck, and we were going to do this, and I had an agent, and so that was possibly the best band I ever had put together, and that was called Stingaree, and if you have to spell it, it's Stingaree, and that was me and Brian McLeod, rest his soul, and Jeff Jones, who ended up in Red Rider. And then we had a piano player named Larry Hamill and a drummer named Skip Layton, who ended up playing with Chilliwack. And I didn't know these guys were going to end up being famous and happy doing what they were doing, but I saw them. They blew my mind. I knew exactly what I wanted to see in the band. Like, I'd already picked out the set list. I wanted a dual guitars, dueling solos kind of thing, and Brian McLeod was just fantastic.
Was this mainly covers, or was it
Yeah,
original?
They were covers, but they were obscure covers, like by Orleans and Boz Skaggs and things like that. And we did originals as well.
And the goal to be playing in bars all the time, is that?
The goal was probably to record, but we were all happy. We were making $150 a week or whatever, and we had steady work and a van, and it didn't really go much farther than that. It was just part of a process. Like, I was aiming to be a studio guy. I'd wanted to be a studio guy since when I was a kid, and they used to play the ads on TV for KTEL Records, and it was for 100 hits by 100 stars or something. It was all on one album, like the grooves were so thin. But they weren't done by the original artists.
Right.
And I would listen to them, and I'd go, I want to be that guy that's playing the copy of that song because I can do that at least that good. I will get at least that good.
Wow.
And so I wanted to be a recording guy. And my dad was a tape recorder freak and everything. So we had tape recorders down our basements, and I figured out how to make sound on our old thing. And so I would tape songs off the radio and then open up the other track and play along with them and stuff. And I was just a little kid. So I had that wanting to work with professionals and get it on tape feeling for a long, long time.
So you never thought of it as, I want to make my own record and be in the studio that way? You
No.
thought it would be better to be a cover band doing K-Tel, right?
I just wanted to be the guy, that got that job to play that song that wasn't in the original band, because I'd hear them and I would go, I'm going to be able to do that, no problem. So,
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. But there was no way I could get to Toronto and make a phone call and go, that guy that's playing on a K-Tel record, I want to take his job. It's not quite like that.
It's not easy to be a studio musician.
No, it's not.
And so how did you find it when you first went into the studio and did the guitar solo or whatever?
Well, that was great. I don't remember other than being really nervous, but if I'm not nervous, then I'm not having any fun. So that was great. But when I finally I started doing jingles at Grand Avenue Studio in Hamilton with Danny Lanois and his brother Bob and those kind of things. So I sang and or played on probably 200 jingles for local car dealerships and malls and things like that, and we were there all the time doing that, and also playing on a show called Smith and Smith, which is that's Steve Smith, who became Red Green. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for 3 seasons, and that's back at around the same time. That was all done at Grand Avenue Studio. So all of a sudden I'm a studio guy and I'm reading music, and I'd only read music for 6 months, but I taught myself how to do it, and it was my ear that got me through once again. We did 3 seasons of that. So it's very stressful because you have to please the guy that's behind the glass if he's looking for something that you're not playing. You've got to adapt on the spot. You can't hold up the thing, and but I love that because I had made a point of becoming versatile while I was learning how to play the guitar. There was friends of mine that hated me for the fact that I would be in a band playing Jimi Hendrix, but then when they caught me in the record store, I'd have a Hendrix album on top of a James Brown album, and I'd be smuggling the James Brown album out of the store because they would think I was a wuss because I was listening to funk or something. So I was learning all of that stuff, and I had to pull from all of that stuff in the studio. You can't just know one thing in the studio and be a session guy because it just won't happen.
So when did you start the studio session gig?
Well, studio session thing was whenever Sultans of Swing came out, whatever year that was.
Okay, so it's like 78 or something,
okay.
Somewhere in there?
And so, because the phone rings, it's an old friend of mine from Hamilton, and he says, there's a TV show, you want to play guitar on it? And I went, of course I do, because at that point I was between bands, and it was like, it's not all gravy for me, this story. Like I got to a point after Stingery had broken up that, I was answering or going to auditions out of the either the buy and sell or the newspaper, and doing things like not even getting the audition for an Elvis cover band and stuff like that. Like, it was pretty down. So then the phone rings, and all of a sudden I'm driving to Hamilton from Toronto doing this television series. So that's how that happened. It was just a phone call from a friend of mine from before.
So you obviously proved yourself and
yes,
other opportunities.
And we liked each other a lot, and he knew that I was capable of just running in and playing with a band and not having to practice with them. I just sort of sit in. So that's the kind of mentality and mindset you have to have if you're going to be a session guy.
What else is important? I mean, obviously, you must be able to create different kinds of sounds.
There's sounds. Well, it's everything. Just everything you would think of. The sound and the feel and the people breathing down your neck and saying stupid things like play more orange or something like that, and you have to sort of go along with it and grit your teeth and play the part and make up things and turn pieces of crap into songs that would actually sound good. That's a major part of what they would call you in for. And I worked with Jack Richardson. He was like my surrogate father. I worked with Jack for years and years and years. I met him. We're jumping back and forth, but in the studio stuff was the Smith and Smith show at Grand Avenue Studio and the hundreds of jingles. And then when I moved to Toronto, I knew a guy named Johnny Rutledge who was in a band at that point called Shadowfax, and he's a singer and guitar player that just, I loved him, and he's also a super guy. So I phoned him up, and I knew that he was starting to sing jingles in Toronto and play. I also sang a lot of jingles too, so that's something people don't know much about, but I also sang as many as I played on. So I asked Johnny how to do that. He says, well, have you done a jingle before? And I said, yeah, I had hundreds of them in Hamilton. And he went, well, how much did you make? And I told him, and he went, oh my God, you got to start making more money than that. So put a tape together and send them to these people. And he gave me a list of people. I sent my demo tapes out, and, months went by. And then one day the phone rang, and somebody asked me to do a jingle. And of course, they asked me if I knew how to play classical guitar, gut string guitar. And I went, you know what? This is the very first time I've ever been asked to play a jingle, and I'm going to have to say no, because I can play it, but if you want like a flamenco thing or something, I don't want to start off what I want to be a career by doing something I'm not comfortable with. So thanks anyway. And they called me back when it was like a regular session. So lucky me.
So at one point, you're making $150 a week, being happy being in your band.
Yep.
I presume doing jingle work, studio work, pays much better than that?
Not at the beginning, it didn't, but it was it's just a whole different thing. Like you're going to work. You're not packing up the truck and driving to Thunder Bay and freezing your ass off in a truck and living in a hole in the wall and stuff. So you can actually sleep in your own bed, and you go in there, and it's air conditioned, and there's a recording console. Like, it's a whole different thing. It would be like selling newspapers door to door, or working at the place where they make the newspapers that actually has walls and a ceiling and stuff. So that's the difference. It's I'm going to say legitimate, but I don't mean it that coldly, because I do love the live performance part, and because my playing in the studio wouldn't be the way it is without all the years I put in on the road, because I don't just read music and play the notes. I know what it's like to play that song and to be in a bar and hear and know what that guy felt like when he was playing those notes. So that makes you stand out, that kind of experience. That's the 10,000 hours thing.
Right. In my world of video,
yep,
I would do things that I'm passionate about sometimes. And then there are gigs where you're just doing stuff in the corporate or whatever, and you're less passionate about. Is that somewhat equivalent to studio work? And I'm not saying you're not passionate about what you do in the studio.
Oh, it's not somewhat equivalent. It's exactly the way it is. Yes, like most of the time it can be mundane, if you just get confident enough to do it. But I always went in there excited and knowing that whatever I recorded that day was going to be on tape and somebody was going to listen to it. It wasn't just playing a great solo in front of a crowd of drunk guys in a bar and it just going into the ether and never ever to be heard again. And I played some solos back then, as I'm sure every musician has, that I'd pay money to hear them again, but they're gone. But when you're in the studio, there she is, so that's a big difference.
Yeah. Doing your own stuff. In 84, you got a Juno for the most
That was 83
vocalist,
or 84,
right?
yeah. I did not win. Alfie Zappacosta beat me out, but I was right up there.
But more for, it's surprising to me. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah,
but
the vocalist.
Yeah, the vocalist. As opposed to the guitar player.
But then, Leonard Cohen won Best Male or Most Promising one year, so anything can happen.
And what did that mean to you to get that nomination?
Well, I was living in Stouffville at the time, and the phone rang, oddly enough, 2 doors down. A girl lived there, worked at my record label. It was just ridiculous. So she phoned me up and goes, congratulations. And I went, for what? And she went, well, you're up for a Juno Award. And it was just weird to hear that, because I had no concept that I'd be up for an award for my record. And then I said, what's it for? And she what's the award for? And she says, most promising male vocalist. And that was just a funny moment for me. It was just like an upside down world.
But you
So
also had a hit single in like the early 80s,
I
right?
did. It was called Dream Away, and Danny Lanois produced that. Yeah, and see the guys on that record is Jim Valance is on drums. I played with Jim, and I asked him to play on this record, and he's famous for writing all the Bryan Adams tunes and
Yeah.
many other things. And Jeff Jones played bass. Jeff from Red Rider and Tom Cochrane and all that stuff. And hearing that back blew my mind. And then shopping it around, that was part of my job. Like after I got the tape, I didn't have a deal, so I had to go and shop around. But I was doing sessions with Walter Zwall,
Right.
from Toronto. I went up to Morin Heights and did 2 great albums with him in 1980. That was sort of the start of my great decade, meeting Donnie Triano and Walter Zwall and Long John Baldry and Danny Lanois, and it was just everything came together then. I was confident, I was angry, I was like motivated, I was not desperate. I was like just was not going to stop until this happened, because everything was right there. So
But I'm
that's
curious
what
as
happened.
to, you had a hit single, you got this nomination.
Yeah.
You're working, and I presume around that time you started working with the Irish Rovers.
That's right. I decided to get off the road in '81, even though I had a hit single out. Friends of mine were phoning me and saying, "You got to come out west. All I hear is your song on the radio and stuff." I've never played that song live in my life.
Really?
No. I had no desire to go. Like, I was a huge Steely Dan fan back then, from the first record. But right then, when they decided to stop touring, whatever, I thought, good on you guys, because that's a whole other thing. Like, that takes away from your life, and it's hard to write, and it's hard to live a life with, knowing friends and things like that, because you're touring all the time. So I decided to do that and be a little bit more in the weeds and just let the record talk for itself. So I didn't get the nomination for that. I got the nomination for the album I did at Phase One with Paul Gross producing.
But did you? So you decided not to pursue more of a solo career at that point?
Mm-mm. Yeah, I had no desire whatsoever.
Wow.
Yeah, to be out there. I just wanted to be this studio guy that I happened to have a record at the same time. It was just a wonderful addition to what all the other great things were going on in my life. Like I was at the same point that my record came out, I was playing on the Fraggle Rock show. So
Right.
I was there for 3 or 4 years working there. With those people, and talk about pressure. Jim Henson is standing behind the glass and whatever. That was big leagues.
Right.
And so I didn't want to leave that. Like I couldn't. It wasn't even an either or thing. Like, do you want to have a little 45 that's being played on the radio, drop everything that's within your grasp right now, and get in a truck with a band and travel around the country playing that song live? Like, I had already done that, even though it wasn't my song. That meant nothing to me. I just wanted to pursue what I wanted to. I was happy the radio airplay was great and all that, but I chose the right thing, and that's what I was going for. I wanted to stay home and record.
That's interesting. I mean, it seems different to me. I mean, it seems like
Yeah, I don't want to be a rock star. I never did.
or the ego. Like
No.
it wasn't about the ego.
I have an ego. Don't let me fool you that way. But it goes in another direction. It's not me. Watch me. It's listen to me. More like that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you do this, and you've done a lot of session work, so with other musicians,
Yes.
what's the different mindset of doing that versus doing commercial work?
Well, you get more time when you're doing, like, if you were working on a record project or something like that. Jingles, you've got an hour or 3 hours and whatever, and you bang it off. Like, it's a whole other trip. Like, especially if I'm playing guitar, I play in the rhythm section, and we put down the bed track in 20 minutes or half an hour, because it's not really about that. It's about selling the product. So if I'm singing a jingle, it's different. Like, then it's me standing in front of the mic with a million guys that can't make up their minds about anything, staring at me from behind the glass. That's the scariest part of anything I've done. And singing. So that that's the difference between and making a record. The pressure is there, and you know that the end result is there. The product is everything, and that product being that band or that artist you're working with. Most of the time, in my situation, I'd be hired to add something to an existing track, so I go in and sit by myself in the room and play along with a record. And there I am. I'm down in my mom's basement playing along with the Beatles records on the tape, right? So I'm so comfortable with that.
Is it
scenario.
easy to get to that headspace or that place? Yeah,
for me it is. It's automatic for me, and that's great. Like, it's not like I'm relaxed. Like, I'm still, my hair's up on my arms and everything most of the time, or my brain is wide open, because I'm not there. Like, if you asked Mark Knopfler or Jimi Hendrix or somebody with a signature sound to play a solo on your record, you would expect it to sound like that when you played it back. Any Joe on the street would go, wow, they got Knopfler to play on the record. What I do is adapt to the song, and that's why there's a lot of stuff out there that nobody would have a clue that I'm playing on. That Tommy Tedesco guy from the Wrecking Crew movie or whatever. It's along that lines, like Mike Francis, my buddy who helped me get into this jingle thing and was a great guitar player and a great friend of mine and made me feel comfortable. Same thing. Mike would go back in the 80s when we would do 4 or 5 jingles a day and movie scores and everything. You'd pack up your stuff and you'd play a funk tune for a Kleenex commercial, and then you'd go and work on some guy's record for 4 hours who was doing a blues album or a rock album or whatever, and you'd have to turn into that person and whatever. And it's so much fun doing that. It's like being an actor. I just don't have to change clothes, but I'm changing mindset and
was
pulling
there
from other sources.
Ever a time that you couldn't get into that role? Like, was there ever a time when...
Fortunately not, because this is where the ego comes in. Like, I won't quit, and I'll push myself until I get it right. And I don't remember ever being anybody saying, thanks anyway, and it's been great, but we'll call you later. I never got that.
Oh.
Yeah.
I presume the most proudest thing you've done is probably your own stuff. But outside of that, in studio session work, can you share with me 1 or 2 things that you've done that you're really, really proud of?
I can't pick anything in particular, and if I looked at what I played on, I could probably say, yeah. Like, there's people like Lisa Price, who is a story in itself. You should interview her. And Long John Baldry and Walter Zwall, and would think about the Fraggle Rock show, or I would think about days where we'd record like 52 songs in 3 days or something for these things, just going crazy and stuff. And then me and Jack going in, just me and Jack. So there's the engineer, and then Jack, and then me. I'm in the control room with my guitar, and them just rolling the tape and me playing overdubs and guitar parts and solos and stuff on 52 tracks in about 3 hours, like just getting in the zone and going, and Jack laughing, and all of us laughing our heads off because it's going so well. Like, I'm just in this zone, and so is Jack, and they're, okay, that song's done. Wow, that song's done. Wow, that song. Okay, change the reel, put on another reel, and go again. And then at the end of the show, it's like, you just did the whole series in 4 hours, kind of thing. And that's the kind of things that make me smile right there. Like, hearing my song on the radio is one thing. I can picture the day I recorded it, and it's the first time I played piano on a record. It's all those little things. And every story I have is a little memory, but it's more to me about I think more about the fun or something weird that happened during the session, not the actual recording of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about working with David Clayton Thomas, which
Yes.
you did recently. Did you tour with him as well?
I did, and that was another beautiful thing. And thank you for bringing up David. He's got an awesome record out right now, by the way. I'm not on it even. That's how good it is. David Clayton Thomas, how did that work? So the Dexters, backed up these the Juno Awards show, 1996, magical year. It was like a Hall of Fame award show in Toronto, and on that show were Dominic Triano, Ronnie Hawkins, David Clayton Thomas, John Kay from Steppenwolf, Michelle Phillips, and Denny Doherty from the Mamas and the Papas, and John Sebastian. And I got to play and meet and hang and tell jokes and laugh and eat whatever with all of those people that night, and we played great. And that night, David Clayton Thomas played a blues tune, and I whipped off a solo, and he turned around and gave me a big, big smile, and then, like, the next day he called me. So
Wow.
that's how that happened. I just right place at the right time, and I happened to whip off a solo that he liked, and he's a blues freak. So this is where my blues guy comes in, not my R&B or my rock guy, because I'd been listening to blues since Music Village, that little store in Burlington that I hung out at and skipped school. Ed McCready, the owner there, was a blues freak, and I grew up with the British blues. So I thought that, like, when the Cream album came out and they played Spoonful or something like that, to me, that was their tune. Like, they wrote that tune, whatever. And Ed would go, "You idiot, LaBarge, here's what Spoonful is." So he'd pull out the original Spoonful, or Born Under a Bad Sign, that kind of thing. Like, and so he gave me the Albert King album that has Born Under a Bad Sign and Crosscut Saw, Personal Manager, that kind of thing. That was where I fell in love with blues. And I have the knack, and this is a very important part of what my talent is, not only playing by ear, but I have the knack of like being a sponge, and so I can absorb things out of a record and they'll stay in my brain, and it will be not the notes per se, but that the essence of the feel of that person. I can try to crawl inside their soul when I'm listening to them, if they hit me like that, and I can pull that out 25 years later. If somebody asks me to play an Albert King solo, I'm not just going, "Oh, I think he uses this sound and he played this note and whatever." I'm like in that record, sitting with Steve Cropper and all that stuff. So that's what I feel in my mind, and I pull Donnie Triano out of my head every time I play, and so that's where I pull from, all these albums that I've whatever. So back to Clayton. So Clayton phoned me up and wanted me to play on a record, and I can't remember which record that. Oh, it was he was putting a band together to play at the Opera House in Burlington and record a live record. So that's where I joined the band, and we rehearsed for one day and then recorded an album, and it fortunately turned out well. Yeah, and then, I just did like a couple of gigs with him. He doesn't tour a lot because he doesn't need to or want to at this point in his life, but lots of recording. I must have done 4 or 5 albums with him, but I went to Russia with him. I went to Norway and a bunch of other really, really great gigs. I'm very fortunate to know him, and we're very good buddies.
So it's not like you don't like to tour. You just prefer not to live your life that way.
Okay, I'll take that. Yeah, it's that to me means the same thing. But I'll tour. I don't really want to tour. No, I don't really want to tour.
You were telling me before that you're not playing as much anymore.
That's right. Well, let's see now. Yeah, the Dexters played at the Orbit Room for 10 years. I played just at that club over 1,000 times myself in a couple of different bands. So I've climbed those stairs many, many times. And then I just, we kind of broke up because it was like we did our 20th year anniversary or something, and I was just getting tired. Like the people were coming up from the crowd and walking up to me and going, "My dad knows you," and stuff like that. And that kind of stuff I didn't really want to listen to. So, because they were sort of posing and being young kids and not really listening to the band. And I remember a classic night of me standing up there, like Alex Lifeson. But let's go to Alex Lifeson for a second. Alex Lifeson is one of my best friends, and he's like Donnie Triano or Doug Riley. He has no pretensions. He will do anything to help you out at any time, and I love him to death. And I just was drawn to him too. We were drawn to each other. So I'm lucky that way too. I can't forget about Alex. He's crazy that way. So back to the Orbit Room 20th anniversary or 15th, one of them. Alex and I are up on stage, tuning up, getting ready to play because he's co-owner of that club.
Right.
So we're tuning up, getting ready to play, and there's the chairs are like 2 feet away from the stage, right? And so there's about 4 or 5 20-somethings sitting in that table, looking beautiful and handsome and everything else. And so I was tuning up, and I looked over, and one of the girls, I saw her mouth this. She pointed at Alex and I, and to her girlfriend, she said, "Who are those guys?" And at that point, I just sort of said, maybe it's time that I should think about not playing here anymore. So, because that was enough for me at that point. So I just said, I'm going to take a break. And so I semi-retired. I was playing the odd little jam gig with friends of mine and whatever, and enjoying the solace. And then I got, over the last 5 years or whatever, I started getting weirdness in my left arm. I have got something, I fell off my roof in 2000, and it really hurt my neck. But that didn't affect me up until 3 years ago. And now all of a sudden it's affecting my arm and my hand.
Wow.
So I've got this big tendonitis in my left hand right now. So I'm not even playing at the moment. But it's going to get better. I've got all sorts of things I'm doing for it, so it will improve. But it was sort of a self-imposed retirement rather than voluntary, and that makes me a little bit angry because it's not fair. But I think about Donnie Triano getting cancer and dying, and that's not fair either. So I'm better off than that at this point. So I'm not playing now.
You're not even picking up your guitar?
No, there's no sense in doing that right now because my hand feels really fat and stupid and everything. It doesn't, I know what I'd like to play, but my fingers won't go there right now. So, yeah, I know it's like a movie, but I'm hoping it will get better because I have a lot of guitars and I'd like to play them. But I'm not, I don't sit in the corner and cry because I can't play the guitar. I played it a lot, and I can play the guitar in my head. So that's sort of how I play the guitar anyway. And, so that physicality of it is okay with me, right now. But it is getting very long in the tooth trying to get this thing under control because it's been 2 or 3 years now.
Wow.
I
so
know.
This is probably the first time in your life since you were 13 that you haven't...
Since 11.
11.
Yeah, since I haven't been able to do something that I felt like doing. Yeah, I know.
I'm so sorry to hear that.
I am sorry to hear it too, but it's not as sad as it sounds. If I was 30 and this happened, I would have jumped off of the bridge or something now, fortunately, if it's going to happen, that's fine. And if I talked to so many friends when I got this, and I was a little embarrassed at first because you always have that paranoid thought, when I was doing jingles all the time, that the phone is going to stop ringing at some point, right? I've always been waiting for that point. So you're still paranoid even at the age of, 60 to tell your friend you got a sore hand, because you're still thinking that Paul McCartney's going to phone you up someday, right? Or at least a chance of it. So, but then as I reach out and talk to people that play guitar or whatever, they've all got stories. I've heard friends of mine that didn't play or couldn't play for 10 years. And I never knew that because I wasn't hanging with them and following their career or whatever. But it's rampant. And I go to high school reunions and nobody's got hand problems, but it's all hips and knees and it's all that talk now, right? It's unbelievable. We're not talking about the new Hendrix record or something. It's man, you wouldn't believe what happened to my knee last week or whatever. So it is all of that. So but they're all very concerned about my hand because they know that they like to listen to me play too. So it's flattering. And there's a bit of pressure involved that way, too, because I sort of feel like I have to get better, but it's motivating, too.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it's weird. It's like we're talking at the end of a movie or something where the guy loses his hand. And then it's all sad, but it's not sad at all.
Oh, good.
Not sad in the least.
When you look back on your life, tell me how you view this journey.
I would do it all over again. I really would. It's been I'm still great friends with guys I played with in my very first band, right up to, there's some of them that aren't here anymore, but very few people who I broke ties with, and No, I just love it. I loved playing high schools and bars and oh man, I know. And my recording career, it's a big story. I could write a book. I really could. And nobody
should.
would read it, but but I'm like one of those guys. It just I when I look back, I've got holy crap. Like I did quite a lot of stuff, and it's what I wanted to do. So you can't have a better ending to a story than that. I did what I wanted to do.
So you've never actually done any other job than music?
I had a few day jobs when I lived in Hamilton, but I played at nighttime. So no, I haven't.
So you've never experienced that other world?
Well, I did enough to know that it's really hard getting up in the morning and going to that place. I don't mind getting up early in the morning and going to a recording studio,
Right.
but I didn't really like the work-a-day world. No.
Wow.
No, it's not for me.
That's crazy that this little kid who watched Beatles on TV said, that's what I want to do, and you've done it.
Ain't it the truth? It's very weird. I feel weird even telling the story, but it's true.
That's great.
It is great, and I'm thankful for it. So having a sore hand is a very small price to pay.
Well, you know what? It's been a real pleasure.
And
sitting here
likewise,
chatting with
Mako, and nice to meet you finally, and Bruce.
Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome.
And I hope your hand gets better, and as soon as it does, you have to call me so we can tell you much of it.
Nice. That's a deal.
Great. Thanks.